There is a moment that most people never talk about, the moment right before they give up. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with a thunderclap or a cinematic score. It's quiet. It's small. It happens in the early hours of a Tuesday morning when you're staring at the ceiling and a thought drifts through your mind like smoke. I don't think I have what it takes. And just like that, something inside you begins to fold. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you are there right now. The question isn't whether you felt defeated. Almost every human being on the planet has. The real question, the one that separates those who rise from those who stay down, is this. Do you understand what's actually happening inside your mind when that thought appears? Because here's what almost nobody tells you. You are not your thoughts. And more importantly, the circumstances of your life are not fixed. They are, to a breathtaking degree, the product of how you think about them. This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't motivational fluff designed to sell you something. This is a practical, demonstrable truth that has been lived and proven by thousands of ordinary people who were once by any measure stuck, and who found their way out by changing one thing, the pattern of their thinking. What follows is not a fairy tale. It's a road map. And it starts where all real change starts, with an honest look at what's going on inside your head. Picture a room full of 600 university students. They've been asked to identify their single greatest personal problem. 75% of them give the same answer. Not money, not relationships, not health, lack of confidence. 3 out of 4 people, educated, capable, young individuals at the beginning of their lives, identified self-doubt as their most pressing obstacle. If you extend that proportion to the broader population, the numbers are staggering. An enormous portion of humanity is walking through its days quietly infected by a deep and corrosive sense of inadequacy. They shrink from opportunities. They talk themselves out of reaching. They decide in advance that they cannot do the thing they most want to do, and then they watch someone else do it, someone no more talented, no more prepared, no more deserving, and they chalk it up to luck or circumstance. But it isn't luck, and it isn't circumstance. It's a thought pattern, a deeply embedded, quietly catastrophic way of interpreting the world and one's place in it. And here is the devastating part. This pattern often has its roots in something that happened long ago. A parent who compared you unfavorably to a sibling. A teacher who publicly humiliated you. A failure that happened at the worst possible moment. A group that didn't accept you. A body that didn't look the way bodies were supposed to look. These experiences, layered and repeated over time, build a mental architecture of defeat. They construct a story, and the story says, I am less than. I am not enough. The things I want are for other people, not for me. And the cruelest part, you forget that it's just a story. You begin to mistake the architecture for reality. The walls of self-doubt start to feel like the walls of the world itself, and you stop even trying to push against them. This is the inferiority complex, not a sign of weakness, not a character flaw, but a learned, and therefore unlearnable pattern. A cage built from old thoughts, and just like any cage, it can be opened. In this moment is not a passive receiver of reality. It is an active generator of it. The thoughts you feed it most consistently become the lens through which you see everything. And the lens you see through determines what you notice, what you pursue, what you believe is possible, and ultimately, what you create. Here is a simple but profound truth. The mind always seeks to complete what it pictures. Think about that for a moment. When you vividly imagine a scene, a conversation, an outcome, an achievement, your brain does not neatly file it away as hypothetical. It processes it in many meaningful ways as real. It begins preparing for it. Neurons fire in patterns that mirror the experience of actually living through it. This is why athletes visualize success before competitions. This is why surgeons mentally rehearse procedures before performing them. This is why fear is so powerful, because when you vividly picture failure, your brain prepares for failure. Your body tenses, your voice changes, your eyes avoid contact. And then, of course, you fail. Not because you lacked the ability, but because every signal you sent to the world screamed, "I don't believe in myself." The reverse is equally true. When you fill your mind with confident thoughts, when you practice deliberately and repeatedly, seeing yourself as capable and powerful and equal to the challenge, something shifts. Not overnight, not in one afternoon, but steadily, surely, the way a ship that alters its course by 1 degree eventually lands on a completely different continent. The mind is not the enemy. It is the engine. The question is only what you're feeding it. Let me tell you about a man who figured this out in a way so simple it almost seems absurd. He was a traveling salesman, the kind who spends most of his working life behind the wheel of a car, driving from client to client across long stretches of road. For years, he had battled a creeping anxiety that seemed to deepen with every mile. He was afraid of car trips. He was afraid of flying. When his family traveled, he couldn't rest until they returned safely. He carried around a pervasive dread, the sense that something was always about to go wrong, and his sales reflected it. How could they not? You cannot walk into someone's office radiating doubt and defeat and expect to inspire confidence in a product. People buy from people who believe, and this man, by his own admission, no longer believed in much of anything. Then he tried something strange. He bought a pack of small cards. On each one he wrote a phrase, short, simple, and powerful. Statements about courage, about faith, about the presence of something greater than his fears. He clipped one to his dashboard each morning before he started driving. And as he drove, those long, quiet miles that used to be filled with anxious thoughts, he read the words on the card. He memorized them. He let them circulate through his mind instead of the old fear-based patterns. When one card became too familiar, he switched to another. Within weeks, the change was undeniable. The anxiety didn't just diminish, it evaporated. His sales improved dramatically. The dread that had colored his every waking hour loosened its grip and eventually released him entirely. What he had discovered through pure intuition was a technique that modern neuroscience would later confirm. The brain is changeable. It is plastic. The neural pathways worn deep by years of fearful thinking can be rerouted. New grooves can be cut. New patterns can take hold. But it requires intention. It requires consistency. And it requires the willingness to believe, even a little, that change is possible. That willingness is everything. There is a story of a man of 52 who sat across from a counselor one afternoon, completely undone. He had lost his business. He had lost his savings. He had lost, as he put it with hollow eyes, everything. He was pale, and still in the way that truly desperate people sometimes are, not agitated but hollowed out, as though grief had taken a spoon to his insides and scraped them clean. "Everything is gone," he said. "There is no hope. I'm too old to start again." The counselor looked at him for a moment, and then, instead of offering comfort or argument, pulled out a piece of paper. "Let's find out," he said. "Is your wife still with you?" A pause. "Yes, she's been wonderful. She would never leave me." The counselor wrote it down. "Your children?" "3 of them. They told me they love me and they'll stand by me." Down it went. "Friends?" "Some. They've offered to help. I don't know what they can do, but..." Added to the list. "Your integrity? Have you done anything wrong?"
No.
The man straightened slightly.
My conscience is clear.
"No, my conscience is clear. I've always tried to do the right thing." Written down.
I'm in
Health.
good shape, actually.
"I'm in
Very
good
few
shape,
sick days.
actually.
Actually.
Very few sick days." On the list. By the time they finished, there were 7 items on that piece of paper. A devoted wife, 3 loving children, friends who stood ready to help, a clean conscience, robust health, the opportunity of living in a free country, and an unbroken faith in something larger than himself. The counselor slid the paper across the table. The man looked at it for a long time. Something shifted in his face. A softening, a slow return to color. "I never thought of it that way," he said quietly. "Maybe things aren't as bad as I thought." They weren't. They never were. But he could not see that until he was made to count what remained instead of fixating on what was lost. This is one of the most underrated skills a human being can develop. The ability to redirect attention. Not denial, not pretending the hard things aren't hard, but the practiced, disciplined refusal to let difficulty become the whole story. The counselor in that story did not dismiss the man's losses. He acknowledged them, and then he showed the man that facts, even difficult facts, are not the final word. What matters far more is the attitude you bring to those facts. As one of the great psychiatrists of the 20th century observed, attitudes are more important than facts. Read that again. Attitudes are more important than facts. The same set of circumstances, filtered through a confident and optimistic mindset, produces an entirely different life than when filtered through one of defeat and fear. This isn't philosophy. It's observable, repeatable, documented human experience. There is a quality that some people possess which seems almost supernatural until you understand its source, an unshakable sense of inner peace. You've met these people. They're not immune to difficulty. They face illness, loss, setbacks, betrayal, the full catalog of human suffering, just like everyone else. But something in them doesn't break. They move through crisis the way a deep river moves around rocks. Not untouched, but undiverted. What is their secret? It isn't luck. It isn't circumstance. It isn't even personality, not in the way we typically mean it. It is a mind that has been deliberately cultivated. The peaceful mind is not an accident. It is the result of specific practiced habits of thought, and chief among them is this, the capacity to empty the mind of its accumulated clutter. Most of us carry into bed each night the full weight of the day. Every unresolved argument, every unanswered question, every projected catastrophe for tomorrow, we carry it all, and we squeeze it into the dark hours, and we wonder why we wake up exhausted. The mind is like a vessel. If you fill it with turbulence before sleep, turbulence is what you find when you wake. But if you practice deliberately, as a discipline, the art of releasing the day's worries at the end of each evening, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind learns to let go, and a mind that can let go can generate power. This is why the relationship between inner peace and outer achievement is not what most people expect. They assume that peace is the reward for success, something you earn after you've won, but the truth is exactly backward. Peace is the prerequisite for success. The calm, uncluttered mind sees clearly, acts wisely, and draws the right opportunities toward it with an almost magnetic consistency. The turbulent mind, by contrast, is genuinely ineffective. When you are fuming and fretting about what was said at lunch, about what might go wrong tomorrow, about what you should have done last year, you are not thinking. You are spinning. And spinning consumes enormous energy while producing almost nothing. Consider for a moment the sheer volume of energy that most people pour into worry. Not productive problem solving, not strategic planning, but anxious and repetitive rehearsal of bad outcomes that haven't happened and in many cases will never happen. Studies on the content of human anxiety reveal that the vast majority of things people worry about are either entirely outside their control, have already happened, or never materialize. The amount of vital energy consumed by this largely fictional suffering is incomprehensible. There's a different way to relate to uncertainty. Instead of asking, what could go wrong, practice asking, what is the worst realistic outcome, and can I handle it? 9 times out of 10, the honest answer is yes, I would survive, I would rebuild, I would go on. The moment you truly accept that, not as a platitude but as a settled conviction, worry loses most of its power. Because worry at its core is the belief that you cannot cope. Strip away the belief and the worry has nothing left to stand on. Here is something that sounds absurd until you watch it happen again and again. What you expect tends to materialize. Not because the universe is reading your mind. The mechanism is far more mundane. When you genuinely expect good outcomes, you behave differently. You take the call you would otherwise avoided. You introduce yourself to the person across the room. You submit the application, ask for the opportunity, pitch the idea. When you are saturated with the expectation of failure, you do none of those things. You don't even try. You preemptively eliminate yourself from contention. The result is not mysterious. Of course, the person who tries succeeds more often. Of course, the one who expects doors to open approaches them with more confidence. And people, sensing that confidence, open the doors. Most people are trapped in a negative feedback loop. They expect failure, so they don't try, so they fail, so they expect failure more deeply. The way out is to interrupt it deliberately. Force yourself to expect something good. Act not from desperate straining, but from a settled, quiet confidence that things are working in your favor. At the heart of all of this is a decision, not a feeling, not a circumstance, a decision. Defeat, in most cases, is not something that happens to you. It is something you accept. And acceptance, quiet, gradual, almost invisible, is a choice. This is not a blame. Life deals genuinely brutal hands to some people. Illness, injustice, loss, heartbreak. There are circumstances that would bring anyone to their knees, and to pretend otherwise is to peddle a dangerous lie. But here is what is also true. Even within circumstances of genuine hardship, the human spirit retains the capacity to choose its orientation. Not its feelings. Feelings are not chosen, they arise, but its orientation, the direction it faces, the story it tells itself about what the suffering means and what comes next. History is populated with people who faced conditions of unimaginable difficulty and emerged not just intact but enlarged. Not because their circumstances were better than yours, but because they made a decision, sometimes consciously, sometimes barely consciously, that they would not be defined by what had happened to them, that they would look for what remained, that they would put one foot in front of the other even when they couldn't see the floor. The decision not to be defeated is not a one-time act. It is renewed, sometimes moment by moment, in the face of ongoing difficulty. And it is, in the end, the most important decision any human being can make, because you can have peace of mind in the midst of struggle. You can have energy when everything around you suggests exhaustion. You can have confidence even while fear is present, because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward in spite of it. So where do you begin? The answer is simpler and more demanding than most people expect. You begin in your mind, right now, today. You begin by noticing the thoughts that move through you most frequently and asking honestly, are these building me up or tearing me down? Are they moving me toward the life I want or away from it? Here is a practical sequence that has genuinely changed lives when practiced consistently. First, when a thought of doubt or inadequacy appears, don't fight it. Fighting thoughts gives them energy. Instead, simply note it. There's a thought of not being enough. And then gently redirect, what do I know to be true about my capabilities? Don't argue with the doubt, pivot past it. Second, build a small daily practice of feeding your mind powerful material, not passively consuming content that leaves you vaguely anxious and envious, but actively choosing to read, listen to, or speak aloud things that expand your sense of what's possible. The mind responds to what you put into it with remarkable fidelity. Third, write down your assets. Not as a feel-good exercise, but as a genuine accounting. Who loves you? What skills do you have? What have you survived? What resources, internal and external, are available to you? Force yourself to see what remains, especially in the moments when loss feels total. Fourth, stop taking counsel only from your fears. Before a difficult conversation, a challenging project, an important decision, you will feel fear. The question is whether you let that fear be the only voice in the room. Introduce another. I have handled hard things before. I can handle this. Fifth, act. Thinking confident thoughts while never doing confident things will eventually hollow out. Think confidently, then act in accordance with that thinking, even imperfectly, even awkwardly, even afraid. Do the thing and the feeling of capacity will follow. This is perhaps the most radical claim in any of this, and it deserves to be stated plainly. You are not fixed. The person you are today, with your particular fears, your particular doubts, your particular patterns of thought, is not the final version of you. It is a version shaped by years of accumulated experience and habit. And what habit has built, different habits can rebuild. The brain you have at 50 is not the brain you were born with, and it is not the brain you will have at 70. It is in constant flux, constantly rewiring itself in response to what you do, what you think, what you practice. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience, the principle of neuroplasticity, the brain's lifelong capacity to form new connections and weaken old ones, means that no thought pattern, however entrenched, is truly permanent. A mind that has spent decades defaulting to fear can learn to default to faith. A personality that has been defined by self-doubt can develop genuine confidence. A person who has never known inner peace can cultivate it as a habit. This does not happen by wishing. It happens by action, specifically by the action of introducing new thoughts consistently and deliberately into the mental environment and allowing them to take root. Think of it this way. Your current thought patterns are like a forest trail, worn by years of footsteps. The trail exists because it was walked. And if you begin walking a different path, even a difficult, overgrown one, you will, over time, wear it smooth. The old trail will, eventually, grow over. The new thoughts don't need to arrive with fanfare. They don't need to feel true when you first introduce them. They simply need to be introduced, consistently, patiently, persistently, until they become familiar. And then, more than familiar, until they become the automatic orientation of the mind. This is the extraordinary promise buried in the concept of positive thinking, and it is so much bigger than the phrase suggests. It is not about forcing a smile or denying difficulty. It is about the deliberate cultivation of a mental environment that makes you more capable, more creative, more resilient, and ultimately more useful to yourself and everyone around you. The most powerful transformations in human experience, the ones that go deepest and last longest, almost always involve an acknowledgement that the individual is not operating alone. Call it what you will, faith, connection to something larger, the quiet at the center of existence. Whatever name you give it, the experience of drawing on a strength beyond your own is not a crutch for the weak. It is a resource available to anyone willing to reach for it. The man driving to the most important sales call of his life found something when he reached for it. The woman lying awake at 3 a.m, certain she was undone, found something. The 52-year-old with his list of 7 remaining assets found something when he stopped measuring only his losses. What they found is not easily described. It is quieter than words and steadier, a sense of being accompanied, and knowledge that the weight they were carrying did not need to be carried alone. Whether you locate this in religious practice, in nature, in the depth of your own consciousness, or in the love of the people who surround you, the practical effect is the same. You are larger than you think. You have access to more than you're currently drawing on. And the barrier between you and that larger self is, in most cases, simply a pattern of thought that says otherwise. Dismantle the pattern and the power flows through. Return for a moment to that ceiling-staring Tuesday night. The thought has drifted in. I don't think I have what it takes. Here is what you know now that you didn't know before. That thought is not fact. It is a habit, a pattern worn into the mind by repetition, by old wounds, by a long-ago story about who you are and what you're capable of. You are not obligated to believe it. You are not required to follow it to its dark conclusion. You can right now in this moment notice the thought, there's that old story, and choose deliberately to tell a different one. Not a lie, not an unrealistic fantasy. A true story. I have survived hard things before. I have people who stand with me. I have skills I sometimes forget I have. I have access to something larger than my fear. And I am not done yet. That story is also true. It has always been true. It simply requires your attention. The capacity for a full, joyful, energized, connected life is not something some people have and others don't. It is something every human being carries, often buried under layers of doubt and old pain, but never destroyed. The work, the real work, is not the external hustle. It is the internal reclamation, the patient, persistent, sometimes achingly difficult project of returning to yourself, of pulling out the roots of the old patterns and replacing them, one thought at a time, with something that builds rather than diminishes. It takes practice. It takes courage. It takes sometimes the willingness to hope when hope feels reckless. But the people who do this work, who commit to it, who return to it again and again even when it's hard, those people change. Quietly, unmistakably, they change. Their faces open. Their energy returns. They begin to attract what they had always been waiting for someone to give them. And they realize, often with surprise, that it was never out of reach. It was always already inside them, waiting to be claimed.